A lot of people have asked me to speak about it, and I actually have. It's just been with some of the programming over at The Blaze, but let's do it for my channel. I'm intrigued by it for various reasons, not just because of where I'm at politically, if you want to say that, but also I'm in Texas. So to catch you guys up to speed, as you know, there's been some things that have been going down at the border, right? And the whole spiel, if you want to call it that, is due to Texas not feeling like the federal government is doing their job, and they're going to have to take things into their own hands with regards to what's happening with the border and immigration. I'm not going to sit here and bore you with the constitutionality and legal go. There's plenty of guys giving their perspective on this. I just want to talk about the political philosophy of it all. Okay. And I guess I'll start by saying, yes, this is good. And I'm going to explain why here in a bit, but let's just talk about what's happening. Okay. Yes, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. Yes, I'm a libertarian, but I'm not an idiot. And I'm for sure not let's say this. I understand reality. I understand practicality, and I will never allow my political philosophy and the end game and what I advocate get in the way of what's actually taking place, especially in terms of how we get to going in that direction, building a more free or more prosperous society. Okay. Your set of ethics, or not even morals, is more principles. You'll find out really quick how the world does not reward often the most principled of the people. Okay. So these are the cards that were dealt with. With regard to borders, or any border for that matter, and the great Hans Hermann Hoppe has talked about this in great detail. When the government has monopolized the land, in this case, it's the federal government, they have said that is theirs, okay? And I'm referring to the border. So whatever you're dealing with, in and out, it has to go through them. They are the ones that set the rules. So as long as that is to be the case, there will always be injustices on either side. Just the reality. The best case scenario is that you mitigate that, try to limit that, especially to the ones that are being stolen from, to subsidize whatever the hell is going on there. Okay. Now, the federal government has said, well, this is ours. Okay. And the problem with that is that you got a bunch of idiots out there in Washington. And yes, they have their people deployed all throughout the nation. Okay. But what happens is that decision and what's happening there, they're so far removed from it, but it also has to go through them. Okay. So while Texas is better suited to deal with Texas problems, they unfortunately have to go through, and it's not just with this issue of immigration, they have to go through the federal government. This is one of the few times where we've seen, and this is why I'm discussing it, Texas, and you see some other states actually back Texas saying, yeah, we're for you doing what it is that you got to do, regardless of what the federal government is saying. And again, that's where the issue comes from, because they've monopolized it. And then if they're not doing their jobs as you feel, let's say suited, or you feel like they're suited to do, they're supposed to do what they've said that they were going to do, well, you're the one that has to deal with the consequences. Who's better to deal with Texas's issues than Texas? Y'all know I'm pro decentralization all day long. So this is why it's good, because it's getting people in that line of thinking why. Okay? Just logically speaking, that there are a bunch of guys out there who, again, if there is to be conflict, they're not the ones that are going to be responsible for dealing with it. You are. The people in that geographical area are. And if you want to get even more specific, the people that are really right there on that border. Okay, in any given state or between any given country, they're the ones that have to deal with the problems. Who are going to be better suited to find, again, a resolution where maybe the most people that possibly can benefit from it. But that's not what you got right now, is it? And I think that's where the conflict is coming from. I want the American people to stop looking at decentralization through a Civil War lens. That boogeyman's term. Anytime there's any conflict, that's where everybody's mind goes. They go through history. We're so far removed from that. And they point to that point of time, and it's like, well, this is why it can't happen. This is why it'll never happen. Though you've had, especially abroad, decentralization efforts that have happened. Hell, in the West, you've had them. And, well, it didn't end in a bunch of dead bodies. Now, that's not to say it's going to be without conflict if there is going to be a legitimate decentralization effort. However, it's a conversation that needs to happen, especially considering the federal government's getting ever more powerful and it's moving in the direction that these types of conflicts are going to happen more often. So to that person that says, well, we can't really have this discussion and can't be seriously considering maybe these states acting more as nation states, right? We can't consider that because it'll be violent, yada, yada, yada. Guys, where in the hell do you think we're heading right now? That's what will be my rebuttal, or rather a question that isn't rhetorical that I would love. What do you think that we're heading in this direction now? And even if it is a case of, well, let's get the right guy in office, as you guys love to say, and it'll all resolve itself. Well, what happens when that person leaves? Here you are back at square one, and there's more conflict that's happening. Texas is best suited to deal with Texas' problems. Same can be said for the rest of the states. And I think we need to start looking at America as not necessarily a failed experiment, because I think what people think is if yes, these states start acting more as nation states and nations as opposed to what they act like now, well, that means that it's doom and gloom. That means there's no trade. That's not true. All that can do. What do you think you're like? Dude, I don't think people understand just how big, number one, America is. There's more people in the metroplex that I live in Texas than there are many, many, many countries that seem to exist, have certain sort of agreements, and are able to exist as nations without any problem. But all of a sudden, minds start getting blown, and it just can never happen if a state as big as freaking Texas starts to maybe start taking themselves into consideration more than everybody else. That's where I think the propaganda worked. Because do they want the American people thinking like that? Of course not. Well, that would be limiting the federal government's power, and nobody wants that. Well, they don't, at least. So they present it as if, well, it's this evil concept that's going to end in all sorts of violence, and there's no way you're being unrealistic because they don't want you considering it at all. It's kind of like what happened with homeschool. You had an entire generation of people that were, because of the propaganda by way of government and at least its agents, tricking people into believing that this was the case. And then you come to find out, well, no, it's not all that bad. In fact, it's far more preferable because you were lied to, and nobody wants to accept that. So that's why it's good. It's getting people to start thinking about acting independently, these states. And it's not even about beef between states or in the federal. That's not what it's about. It's about solving issues, right? Texas is best suited to deal with Texas's problems. That's just the bottom line.